Hi everyone, my name is Leiske. I top 8'd Anaheim Kara Expo at the Bushiroad Championship Series. Yeah, I'm here to convince you that Standard isn't that boring. So a little preface to me, I'm mainly a Magic player that was introduced to Vanguard recently by a close friend. I actually started playing around Unite Team Q4. Due to the fact that my community has some very high skilled players and people that are very passionate, I was able to level up really quickly, and this was my first BCS. It was a great experience. I met a large number of new people, and I saw many friends from different parts of California. It's pretty cool that we're all united by that, one common thread that we all play Vanguard. So I'm going to take you through the deck breakdown. Oracle Think Tank lists are pretty standardized. You're generally going to see maybe a 2 to 4 card difference between every deck. Usually it involves the grade 1 and 2. Sometimes you see 11 or 10 grade 3s. I tend to defer to better players when it comes to making deck building choices. I mean, they're better players. Why shouldn't I listen to them, right? And a lot of what you hear has been said before, and should be credited back to the players that are just simply better than me. I'll be discussing two specific matchups that I had significant trouble with in testing, that being Tachikaze and Murakumo, both Excel clans, and obviously they're very difficult due to the amount of pressure or card advantage that they can generate, or deny actually in some cases. So my list was actually very similar to another BCS top. Yeah, like I said, it's usually within 2 to 4 cards. My grade 3s, very traditional, 4 Imperial Daughter, 4 CEO, 2 Deer. I moved from 11 to 10 grade 3s simply because of the Murakumo matchup. I actually think 11 grade 3s is ideal. You want to see Deer, and you want to see it every game, and you want to be able to Deer early. And so on your first Imperial Daughter ride, soul charging a grade 3 and having a Deer in hand to an unprepared player can mean an early game close for you. But unfortunately, you have to make concessions that Murakumo is simply a good deck and very good against you, so you need to run 10 instead. Grade 2s, I run 12. 4 Promised Daughter, 4 Mei, 2 Soa Torihime, and 2 Battle Sister Tort. I'll be breaking down why I run the 2-2 split of those girls later. I think both cards are fantastic and serve their purpose. I know that a lot of people actually do not like running Tort anymore post AL4 due to the fact that Murakumo kind of punishes you for running that card, but I'll give some counter arguments to that. So my grade 1 lineup, I'm actually only running 11 grade 1s. I think moving forward, this number is okay. I would prefer to run 12, but you can only have 50 cards in the deck, right? So what can you do? 4 Circle Mages, best grade 1 of the game. Maybe besides Dandy Guy, but Circle Mages is nuts. 3 Farfall Mages, love checking the top. Makes our Amaterasu bigger. Lets us get the cards we need. Luckbird Luckbird basically says when you check the top, you can draw that card. And Soul Blast 2 is actually fairly free because nothing else in this deck besides Deer requires Soul Blast. So really it's on place, draw a card. It's fantastic. And the last grade 1 is Goddess of Tide of Times, Mizuno Hame. I'll be breaking that down. I know it's not the typical one anymore. A lot of people moved away from it. Normally Oracle Guardian Gemini occupies this spot. However, I made this change to combat Tachikaze and Murakumo specifically because I wanted to hit greater numbers on the turns that I was able to pressure them to be able to push through that offense. The trigger setup is as normal, and I do run Lozen Magus. I get that it's not the bunny, but I love anime girls. What can I say? Here's the deck list in text format. I'll leave it on the screen for a couple seconds just so if you prefer to see it this way, you can. Grade 1 choices, like I mentioned, I run Goddess of Tides of Time, Mizuno Hame. Like I mentioned, this card has been moved out of OTT deck lists generally for a while now. I am playing it for the same reason that I am playing Sotori Hime, which is the advantage against Excel clans. If I am stuck on a Vanguard with no way to make it more powerful. For instance, I don't have the Counterblast or CEO skill, or I don't have, or I'm not rewriting Imperial Daughter, this booster makes my column 26,000. That's pretty strong. It basically means that they can't just 10k guard it, right? Like they actually need to present a 15k guard, which for some decks is actually pretty difficult. What often happens when I swing with this, say for instance against Murakumo, you don't, like, remember, you don't have to, it has to just boost a Vanguard, you don't have to attack a Vanguard. And so you can be swinging at Musashi in the Murakumo matchup for 26,000, plus, if you did check with CEO, it's 31 or 36, and then the threat of triggers. What it forces the opponent to do is either intercept or put more guarding from hand, and it's free. It's limit break 3. Like, it's not hard. And against like when you're riding and making those huge Imperial Daughter turns, it makes these columns that are just ridiculous to guard. Against Excel specifically, if you know that they don't have a perfect guard, or you hadn't seen them check a perfect guard, or they used one previously, right? You can make a 47,000 power column, which is just almost impossible to guard against, especially with trigger threat, which you most likely, with the amount of times you've checked top at this point, you have, whether it be a critical, draw, heal, etc. Yeah, it was actually relevant in my rounds against one of my Tachikaze opponents, and it created a column he couldn't guard. So I've been asked, like, why no Oracle Guardian Gemini? So it's fantastic in the mirror and against Kagero. Against Kagero, right, you don't really want to take, more than 3 damage, right? You don't want to die to that waterfall. But I find against Kagero, even 3 damage is too much, because you can just end up losing to a late game waterfall. Like, it is very difficult to guard the 3rd waterfall. Almost impossible. And, especially if they had ridden an Overlord once or maybe twice at some point. And depending on the number of perfect guards you see, it becomes like a race to basically kill them. I decided to lean into Excel and really tech against that. And that involves running Mizuno Hane in place of Oracle Guardian. And did I get punished for making that decision in the top 8? I feel like I did. I'll break it down a bit more when I get to that slide. And against in round 8 against Kagero, I feel like I did. But outside of that, against Excel, this card was not missed. I enjoyed having the extra power from Mizuno Hane more than anything else. So Battle Sister Tort, when this card came out, everybody thought it was the nuts. It was the nuts because everyone was playing Oracle Think Tank. The clans that could combat Oracle Think Tank, like Tachikaze, if Tachikaze didn't ride Gigarex first ride, you could still get Tort online. I was totally on board for running 3, maybe not 4, 3 to 4 of this card. The main complaints I hear about it now is that it's a win more card, and that it forces you to play differently in Greedier. And I mentioned it later on, but I didn't include it in here, and that it's basically useless against Murakumo. All 3 of these are valid complaints and reasons not to run this card. However, my counterpoints are this. In BCS, you're playing you're playing Vanguard, which is like a hyper high variance game. And not only that, it has like a best of 1 Swiss structure, which is super punishing, right? Maybe if we see best of 3s in the future, this reasoning changes, right? But you want to be able to slam the door shut the minute you can, enabling less of a chance for your opponent to heal out and come back, crit you, or just in generally, you want to limit the opportunities for variance to just basically screw you over. And I think that it is worth running in some number. And playing differently or around a mechanic isn't an issue as long as you're not committing beyond reasonability. Sometimes you do get greedy and you do get punished. I feel like there's actually a learning curve on this card that doesn't exist for a lot of the other Oracle Think Tank cards. Like Promised Daughter, there is no learning curve. You just get rewarded for putting her on the battlefield. It's like, that's it. But for this card, you have to play around it and respect it. and sometimes you just have to guard with her. Like sometimes you're just like, man, I have 7 cards in hand, even after my on ride and draw, I don't think, and protect gift in hand, I don't think I'm gonna get to 10. Well, I guess that means I have to intercept or guard with her, right? This card can also draw pressure off of you if you're sitting at close to 10 cards in hand and your opponent thinks that you have a way to get there. This card often, even at playing against Murakumo players, in my testing, my very limited testing against that deck, due to locals not having it as much, the Murakumo players would often swing at this card if I ended up hitting early draw triggers. And yes, that's playing into variance. It's not consistent, but I don't know. I feel like, running 2 of this card, it costs you next to nothing and can reward you so much if you can play around it reasonably. So for Goddess of Insight, so Torihime, I never liked this card. It's Counterblast 1, and all of my Counterblast goes to my Vanguards, right? That their abilities are just so much stronger. Basically, if you run a large number of this card, 3 to 4, I feel like you have to run Oracle Guardian, Robot Baby, right? To countercharge with, and that reduces the number of grade 1 options I have. That means I can't run Mizuno Hame. That means I maybe have to cut more Farfall Magus, right? And I don't like that. However, I will concede that Sotori Hime is fantastic against Excel decks in one very valuable way, which is setting up defensive triggers for the following turn. Excel decks, Murakumo, sorta, but Excel decks generally fall over to defensive triggers. Aquaforce, Novas, not so much Tachikaze. Sometimes Tachikaze, like their smaller columns that aren't on the Excel circles and aren't Gigarex, fall prey to this. But yeah, setting up that defensive trigger is pretty nuts. Basically, this card offers flexibility. And that's why I'm considering moving her to a 3 and maybe adjusting my grade 1 lineup. But yeah, flexibility is often worth the price. If I was only playing against Shadows and Royals, in the mirror all day, I just play Fortor. There's no reason not to, but that's not the case. So I have to, adjust the deck for that. So I'm gonna go over 2 matchups. I didn't want to go over them all. I mean, I feel like a lot of them are just coin flips. Like I feel like Kagero is just whoever goes first a lot of the time. I say that with there's always variance involved, right? So Murakumo and Tachikaze represent the 2 most consistently difficult matchups for Oracle Think Tank. Both the Excel clans attack multiple times a turn, or either restrict or generate card advantage, and have specific units that require additional cards to guard it successfully. During Anaheim, 3 out of the 6 rounds I actually played, I had a 2-round bye, were actually against these decks. It was very stressful. I was hoping to play against Force all day, but as I was told by a very wise person that you want to play 1 Murakumo in Swiss and 1 Murakumo in top 8, and so I did my time. Murakumo represents the single hardest matchup for OTT. Zanbaku and the Arresters, Musashi, they're all just very potent threats. There are 2 general philosophies that I've heard. It's either to race or to restrict Counterblast. During my limited personal testing, like I mentioned, it wasn't too popular at locals, and I still am adjusting to Cardfight area. I found that racing did not often work in my favor. I would always get blown out by like a draw trigger or a heal trigger, and my pressure would just fall apart. I decided instead to try to continuously limit Counterblast at 2 and attack at units that essentially may bait the Murakumo player to use Counterblast. So that's units like Million Rat and stuff like that. Musashi generally dies on sight. That card is too good. It's like it's Tachikaze's card but free, and like yeah, it's just nuts. I use Circle Magus oftentimes to just cycle all my bad grade 3s to the bottom, cycle the grade 2s that I don't want to see to the bottom, and just look for Sotori Hime and CEO Amaterasu. You do want to, you would like to keep one copy of Imperial Daughter in hand as a finisher, but sometimes you just can't afford to do that if you need to be guarding humongous Musashi attacks. Like I mentioned, Soto Hime is used to set up defensive triggers, and I actually found that calling CEO to rear guard and using check abilities to boost her right creates pretty large columns. There was one point in my testing where I actually had 3 CEOs out on the battlefield, you know, 1 on Vanguard and 2 on rear guard, and they were all swinging for 27k just by themselves. I understand that's not going to happen every time, but you know, just 22k by themselves, which is 2 checks, is more than reasonable. You know, even just 25k columns with an 8k booster is still good. It demands a large amount of guard. It allows you to pressure if the player plays Musashi, and you know, just get that card off the battlefield. You do not want to see that card. That card is bad news. Tachikaze is actually the 2nd most difficult matchup for Oracle Think Tank, in my opinion. 3rd being Kagero. That's a personal opinion. Soto Hime can be used once again to set up defensive triggers. I actually find that Tort is very strong in this matchup. Tachikaze doesn't actually pressure that much until like the 2nd or the 1st or 2nd grade 3 ride. Usually I find it's the 2nd, but I know it can be earlier based on variance. The double crit, the 2 damage and the 26k swing represents a hard guard. You know, she's 18k by herself, 8k booster, it's pretty good. And then if you just even check a single trigger, you know, you end up having to put 25k guard in front of it. That's just really difficult. If the Tachikaze player sees more than 2 perfect guards, and it doesn't even have to be in drive checks. It could just be drawn off the top of the deck. You're gonna have a very hard time. It essentially means that like your pressure just ends up being watered down to 2 attacks per turn, and they get like, you know, 4 or 5 attacks per turn once they start getting those Excel circles set up. You know, I learned this lesson actually at a shop challenge. Don't get baited into attacking rear guards that give them cards. Like, I understand, like, you always want to, you know, attack with all of your units or be efficient like that, but yeah, don't get baited. I learned the hard way. So I'm going to go through round reports. This is fairly long, but I feel like it's important. It was a long day, and I only took loose notes, so you know, I apologize if everything is not 100% accurate. I feel like it is, but you know, if my opponents, you know, remember playing against me, they can always, you know, point it out to me. Basically, I had a bike card. The Game Core Shop Challenge, I managed to squeeze out a win. It was a very cool day there, and I picked up Red Dragon Inn 2, which is a fantastic board game. Yeah, my first round, round 3, I got paired up against Murakumo. Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I was given the sage advice that you know, you're probably going to run into 1 Murakumo in Swiss and 1 Murakumo in top 8. I was ready to do my time. I hope this was going to be my one. He activated Million Rat one too many times and ended up not having enough counterblast early to lock me, and so I was able to swing more freely at him. I forced him to guard a little bit more, and at the point where he could lock me, I think he was at 5 damage. I had 12 cards in hand, and I'm on CEO, so I'm just able to use her ability to keep, you know, plussing even if I'm, you know, being restricted. He ended up after the turn where he locked me, he ended up attacking again and checking 2 Musashi. So I knew that I needed to win that turn, otherwise I was going to have a lot of trouble. I jammed Imperial Daughter and created a large central column with, you know, the units that I talked about, just swing in, and managed to deal a lot of damage with her. That secured me the game. Round 4 was actually my loss. I went 7-1. It was a long and difficult game. It ended after my opponent wrote his 3rd waterfall. I didn't go first, which was very frustrating, and he checked a large number of draw and heal triggers. My clock wasn't fast enough to avoid the 3rd waterfall. When I realized that, so he checked a heal early, and then checked another heal before his 1st waterfall, I should have realized that this game was going to go long because of that, right? And I should have guarded his early waterfall to be able to take a later waterfall. The earlier waterfalls are obviously smaller, but are more dangerous to guard at like a 1 to 2 to pass because he has more triggers in the deck. But you just have to. Sometimes you just have to gamble against Kagero, and that's just the way the cookie crumbles, right? I was hesitant at some point to play a Promise Daughter because I needed him to swing at me for Counterblast. I should have played it and forced my opponent to make decisions. I think if I would have taken one less attack, whether or not I got it to activate my Vanguard's abilities, it would have been actually easier for me to end up winning with a deer turn later on. So at this point, I was a little discouraged. I was kind of disappointed that I got blown out so hard by Kagero. I'm always nervous around that matchup. And I sit down in round 5. I sit across from a Tachikaze player. I do have a lot of practice with this. We have more Tachikaze players at our locals, and I've met a fair number of good Tachikaze players during shop challenges. My opponent didn't pressure me enough. Obviously, grades 1 and 2. They did not ride Gigarex on grade 3. So when it went to my turn, I put 2 torts in play, both online, and I had a draw trigger on top, so I played a booster for one of them, and I just proceeded to put on pressure. Basically, when your opponent doesn't see Gigarex in time, you can take the game fairly easy. I also damage checked 2 of his perfect guards, so as I mentioned earlier, he didn't actually see them, which is great. And I healed once, which enabled me to, once he did get access to those cards, I was able to freely take his Vanguard. Round 6, talking to my opponent, and we're talking about different matchups, and my opponent, the guy, or sorry, not my opponent, but the guy seated to my left is hyping up Tachikaze. My opponent's like hyping it up with him, and I'm like, this guy's not playing Tachis, is he? And he flips over his Vanguard, it's Tachis. Wasn't too happy about the run back. Just all these Excel clans, man. I was really hoping to play Force all day. I hadn't actually played against Shadows yet at all, and actually throughout this whole day, spoiler, I did not play against Shadow Paladins, despite it being all over the top tables and a fair chunk of the top 8. I ended up winning out a very close match that involved me checking 2 triggers despite whiffing on Victorious Tier. So I guess I sacked it out, right? Like sometimes you get lucky. My opponent rode Gigarex on time and was able to pressure me from using Tort. I remember having to consciously guard with her. I was a little disappointed. I damage checked one of his PGs, and I did see him check another, so I was able to, at some point, deer him, and pretty confidently that he wasn't going to PG, so I stacked a single row with everything, essentially. In round 7, I played against Novell. Kagero Novell build. I was really surprised when he rode the grade 1. I wasn't too familiar with it all yet. I wasn't worried about Novell itself. I was worried about the number of waterfalls he was running. I could tell that I think the number of waterfalls had to have come down, or he just was running a large number of grade 3s and 4s. He ended up with a lot of grade 3s in hand, both from drive checks and the skills of his units. And he ended up eating a double or a triple crit 4 damage Imperial Daughter, and didn't check heal. I went first, which put me so far ahead, and I rode the proper grade 1, and I had everything that game, and it felt pretty good to play. This was Kagero, but not Novell. This was the full waterfall build. This was a very close game. I was forced to take a waterfall at 3 damage. It was a later waterfall. I can't remember if it was number 2 or number 3. I think it had to have been number 3. But my opponent had checked very few criticals early on in the game, so I was terrified of taking an extra critical. I just resigned myself to gambling it, and I lived and ended up deering on the following turn. Going first is super important in this matchup. It often is decided by who gets to go first. If you're unable to basically protect his Overlord, life gets difficult because you have to consciously choose to put a lot of guard in front of it. Good Kagero players, if you let Overlord hit, will re-stand Overlord for the sole purpose of reducing your guard. I'm often told that you shouldn't re-stand Overlord unless you checked a critical trigger. I don't think that's true. I think Kagero is you put on. I was told by the player who eventually placed first. His name's Oscar. That you just have to put on a helmet and keep punching through that wall. And that is essentially the OTT player's hand. And so I think restanding Overlord is super important. You can attack with Overlord with a Gaius sitting in the back. Choose not to boost with it. If your opponent takes it and you restand and now you have Gaius, like I don't know. Yeah, I think you should always try to restand Waterfall. It's pretty nuts. Of course, you know, I recognize that, you know, Standard is, you know, not as diverse or difficult of a format due to the smaller card pool and the fact that gifts just reward you for going first, so it's kind of a coin flippy format. But I think Standard is going to develop well, and I'm very excited to see where it goes next. I'm also learning Premium, which is what I'll talk about later on. So top 8 actually took a while to start because of like a couple players or a single player had a number of deck registration errors and like marked sleeves. It was a little unfortunate to see that that player essentially the judges could consistently pick out every single trigger and grade 3 from that person's deck because they were marked. However, the judges ruled that, you know, he just needs to switch out his sleeves and he can play. Personally, you know, I think it's a little suspicious. I don't know the whole story, so there may have been like more of an explanation. But my immediate judgment would be, hey man, see you later. Like, you got marked stuff. And after all of that, I ended up with my first mirror match of the day, actually. I played very poorly. I misplayed multiple times. My opponent, you know, reflecting on that game, presented 3 different ways for me to take control of the game. Just mistakes on his part, and I missed each one. There was an opportunity where I could have, I didn't have a Circle Magus, but I had a luck, and my opponent went first and rode a Circle Magus, but I had a Luckbird. I should have rode Luckbird. I ended up drawing another Circle Magus. I put that into play on the behind my Vanguard. I should have put it to the left rear guard column and attack in and give all trigger effects if I did get one to my rear guard. And use my Circle Magus to filter towards CEO because at that point I only had Imperial Daughter. That way he doesn't gain that card and I still get my drive check. Another opportunity came when he moved. I rode Tort, unfortunately, and he moved up his Farfall Magus to get an extra attack in on his first grade 3 turn. He was only at 2 damage and both were turned face down. I, like a fool, didn't attack into his rear guard and pass, so he was able to ride Imperial Daughter and use his effects. These are very basic things that I know and am conscious of, but just was unable to execute upon in the top 8. I don't think it was nerves. I can blame fatigue, but, you know, it's not something I want to do, and not something that I feel, like, good with, you know, blaming. It's just an excuse. Another excuse may be that the mirror is my least practiced matchup. I mean, I can present a bunch of excuses, but I just got to fix it, right? And so I'll be fixing the mirror in the future, playing that more, being more active on hopefully Cardfight area. School has been pretty rough in terms of that, so I haven't been able to dedicate that much time to it. But I am qualified for everything that I can be qualified for Magic right now, so I'm able to put a lot of time into Vanguard. And really, that's the end of the slides. I'm going to talk a bit briefly about Premium, give some shout outs. Like I said, I started in Unite Team Q4, so I don't have any experience with any of the older cards. I still entered Sunday. I own both Gize and Ange. I decided to play Ange. I didn't like how Gize was basically standard. I was playing standard in Premium, essentially. I didn't like how it was so variance driven and I could lose games that I had control over simply because I didn't have a second copy of CEO, Ami, or Imperial Daughter in my hand. I also just don't enjoy the way Gize plays a lot of the times. I mean, you can have the highest highs with Gize getting that first stride, or you have the lowest lows where you have to like fifth stride, ultimate stride, and you end up dying to Gallop guard breaking the hell out of you. Like it's. I just wanted a deck where I could control more of the game. And I felt that Ange was the best deck to do that. I used Age-Ult's build. I was Ange Trois. I ran 2 of the Superior Riding Grade 3 and 1 of the Top Idol Riviere. In the future, I might move up to 3 of the Superior Riding Grade 3. A lot of my opponents respected the combo and actually didn't attack me when I went first. I think that's correct. However, what that enabled me to do was either Grade 2 game them or, you know, just get up enough value in my hand that I was able to pressure them anyways. I ended up going XM2 due to some very unfortunate circumstances I'm not going to get into. But I had a blast and I learned a lot about different cards. I didn't realize that Kagura could actually blow you out with G cards. That was pretty crazy. Yeah, I met a lot of cool people. Shoutouts to first and foremost Deo for getting me into Vanguard. Shoutouts to Alberto for putting up with me and practicing with me. I literally just messaged him, hey dude, I need to practice this matchup, and we'd either play it or just jam games. I think we played a large amount of Kisei versus ZTB games for a while, and I know that's not very fun for him, but it was a good learning experience. Shoutouts to Devin. I would say, hey Devin, I need some practice with Ange, and he'd come and play blasters and gallop against me. Very cool dude. Shoutouts to Andrew, Chato. Shoutouts to basically everybody at the shop. Chris, thank you for always being a cool dude. Shoutouts to Antoine for showing up and playing every week. And you know, I'm probably forgetting people, but you know, anybody who goes to the Arcane Lab, you're the real MVP. Shoutouts to both the shop owners of the Arcane Lab for really trying to get Vanguard off the ground. They've hooked us up so much with, you know, low card price, low case prices. Just in general, just they really wanted to see this scene thrive, and we basically wouldn't be here without them. So thank you very much. Big ups to Justin and all of the PPG guys. You know, I watch you guys play and I see what high level Vanguard looks like, and I learned how to emulate, and I learned from you guys. Justin in particular was the person who crushed me in the mirror at a shop challenge. I learned, wow, they're you know, it's the first time where I really saw that, man, like that's good play. And so I tried to emulate that, you know, going forward. And you know, like I said, if I forgot anyone, it's not on purpose. It's I'm just bad at that. I'm going to continue playing Vanguard. I don't necessarily have the money to fly out to events and stuff like that, but definitely will be attending anything close. Next set of events I think are going to be at a convention down in Fresno, and I'll be there trying to win some fight money. But other than that, thank you very much, and have a great day.